Welcome to episode 251, Pivoting a Conversation When It Gets Off Track.
Welcome to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist and performance coach. And here on the show, I'm going to challenge you to think deeper, commit to greatness, and develop a stronger mindset. You'll hear stories from those who are living life on their terms, and you'll receive strategies that will help you level up. So the question is, are you ready to be your own 1%? Let's get started.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, mindset specialist, and I'm grateful that you're here. If this is your first time, welcome to the show. If you're a return listener, welcome home. Super excited to continue to talk about what is so difficult for a lot of us is the hard conversations, right? And this episode is going to be about how to pivot a conversation when it's gone off track, as they tend to do, especially when there's heightened emotion and embedded in the conversation is difficulty. I will say that if you notice my voice is a bit different today, you are right. I have some nasal congestion thanks to my two petri dishes of children who pass me just about every germ they have. So thank you for your understanding, and I'm excited to dive in today. So the structure of today's episode is going to be, talking about common ways that people react during hard conversations, strategies and tools to use in your delivery of this hard conversation, examples both personally and professionally, and then what to do when the conversation veers off track, and then summarizing at the end with, just some ways to move forward once that conversation is had. I will say again that these aren't silver bullet strategies, right? These are highly effective, but they're not foolproof. And also they're not in order. Last episode, I mentioned that these types of conversations are like dances, right? And it's true. Amanda and I started taking salsa lessons last year in an attempt to do more, different things that we kind of get in our pattern. And I suggest that we do dancing. And it's something that we used to do a lot of when we were younger. And as we got older, we kind of got off track. And so we did, and we had a blast. It was incredible learning, all the steps and learning to trust each other and find our own style within being present with the music. Right. And I can't help but think about conversation as dances, because you could have the right tool. You can know how to communicate from a tools and strategies perspective. But if you're not present in that conversation, if you're not listening, quote unquote, to the music, to what is being said and also what is not being said, then you can use a really effective strategy at the wrong time, and it's not going to land because you're not picking up on the cues, right? And so these frameworks and strategies that I share with you are kind of like teaching you the steps, and then you go and practice through listening to the music and being in these types of environments. You're not going to get better by avoiding. So utilize this information, go and practice this as often as possible. The better the communicator you are, the better leader you are, the more impact you'll make, the more influence you'll have. And as a byproduct of those two things, man, your money will probably go up, your income, and just your overall fulfillment, because you'll be able to articulate yourself better, understand people better. And, when you find yourself in conflict and in challenge, be able to navigate out of it or navigate within it. Right. So let's look at some common ways people react during hard conversations. This can happen in varying degrees, every time to part-time. You have threats and name calling, masking, not explaining your full truth, just agreeing, avoidance altogether, withdrawing, just going numb and silent in the conversation, deflecting. Someone asks a question, you redirect it. John Gottman, who is a psychologist out of the University of Washington, identified 4 communication behaviors that consistently derail conversations and are actually detrimental to any relationship, but specifically in his research, intimate relationships. And he calls these the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? And those are contempt. This is like rolling your eyes in a conversation. It's the disregard of a person or an idea, and you think that they're beneath you. Blame. It's not your fault, it's their fault. Defensiveness, right, shows up when we deny responsibility of our own contribution to the difficult conversation or the situation at hand. And then stonewalling, right, including passivity, avoiding a certain topics, a refusal to participate or contribute to the discussion, withholding relevant information. These 4 things can take a conversation to a place that you don't want it to go, right? And if you're wanting to be a leader that can foster strong relationships, you're going to have to recognize when, one, you're doing these things, but then also when others are doing them, and have strategies around it to pull them out of it. Okay, so the delivery, right? If you listen to the last podcast, you will have a solid framework for preparing for a conversation, how to make sure you know your intention, what's going to trigger you, what you want to say, what you can control / can't control. All that's going to help you feel prepared going into this dance of a hard conversation. Now you're in it. You committed, you're sitting across from the person, your heartbeat is pounding, or your heart rate's going up. You may be sweating, mind's racing, right? Like, what are some things that you do or I do that has helped me navigate very tough conversations? And here are a few. Again, there's no particular order, but these are things that I've just pulled out throughout the years that I've noticed have been really effective for me. So one is, maybe you may have heard this before, but focusing on addressing the behavior, not the person. When we say you're a bad person, when we assume that they did this on purpose and we associate that to their identity and that comes out in our language, we automatically create an adversarial defensive conversation. By focusing on the behavior, we do our best to remove the identity from the behavior and isolate something that is not completely all about who that person is. And by keeping it there, we don't go personal, right? People may take it personal, yes, but we're doing our part and not using personalized language. We're saying this is a behavior that is not okay. Here's why it's not okay, and here's what I'm hoping that we could find out a better way to do having this conversation, because this behavior clearly is not working for me, for the company, for the team, for you even. So we got to talk through this, right? This leaves the person a bit more open to receiving the feedback because it's not directed towards their identity specifically. Number 2 is citing examples and context from your point of view about what they did and the story that you created about why they did it or what that meant to you, right? So for example, it's like, when you did X, when you didn't call on me in the meeting, when you didn't return my phone call, when you didn't pick up the kids, when you didn't fill in the blank, I don't have to say it in this exact same language, but I created the story that it meant you don't care. You don't want to be a part of this team. You think I'm a bad leader. Fill in the blank of your story. What this does is it leaves room for them to correct what meaning you attached to that behavior. And it opens up discussion around what the intention was, details that you may not know of, but now they understand how you're looking through, what lens you're looking through compared to what they were doing. And you could also invite them to share what their thought process was. Again, this is the dance. This invites more information into that conversation that helps you pull out details that give you a more accurate representation of what really happened, right? The The third kind of goes after this. It's like ask them to share their feedback on what you've noticed or brought to the conversation. So you want to invite them to share and comment on the examples that you've given and the stories that you've created around the behaviors that they've demonstrated. When we invite people, it's collaborative. When it's one-sided, they're going to go on the defense. Now there are conversations that, it's not about collaboration. It's just, I need to deliver this. They did something wrong. We can't have that, and there's no room for discussion. Totally understand that. There's time and place. Most conversations I find are of the collaborative sort, and so having their feedback involved keeps the engagement alive, keeps the dance going, and it's not a dictatorship. The other strategy, and the next strategy, is to use questions strategically. I can't tell you how many times I hear about leaders only using closed questions, yes or no answers. And this doesn't this doesn't open up the conversation for more understanding or even for more leverage. If they don't give you information, how can you question more or accurately, or how can you use what they're saying to build your next statement, right? And we can't do that unless they tell us more about what's going on. And when we're talking in a professional lens about holding someone accountable, we want to know as much information as we can about why they want, what they want, who they are, where they come from, because all of that data, all of that information helps us connect deeper and frame our conversation in a way that's going to land most effectively for them. So having a blend of open and closed questions just helps them feel more seen. It helps you get more information, and it helps that overall conversation become more effective because you're extracting the right information and being able to utilize it in the correct ways. Another strategy here is have personal examples of stories that you can share to help them open up if need be. This means like your own personal experiences around a challenge or a problem that's being discussed. So if you notice that as you're sharing what you're sharing and they're kind of, closed or shut off, you can share a story or an example of a time that you felt similar and how you worked through that feeling, right? And so if I'm sitting across from somebody and I say, hey, the other day when you did this, I created a story that fill in the blank, and you notice that their body language automatically tightens up, they lean back in their chair and they kind of become quiet. That would be a cue to me, depending on the context, to use a potential story from my past and say, look, I know that these conversations are never fun. I remember when I was sitting in a conversation with one of my leaders or with my ex-girlfriend or, whoever, and I felt defensive. I felt nervous. And one of the things that helped me was just remembering that this was happening for me, that this was sharpening my communication skills. And so, my intention here is to serve and to help and to understand. And so can you help me understand the situation that happened, right? I'm using my own personal experience to create an opening for them to see that I've been in a similar situation, and also demonstrating some vulnerability by going first, that in return can communicate to them, oh, okay, well, he's been through this before, or he has the courage to say that he's been through something like this before. It just creates another potential opening for them to want to get out of their own head and into the conversation. Lastly, is being mindful of triggering language. Personal triggering language, like in a personal relationship, this can look like, we need to talk. You could change that to, can I talk to you about something I've been thinking about, right? Just the change in language can change the reaction that it has in other people. There's so many horror stories of breakups that have happened between, we need to talk, that even if it's not about a breakup that you're wanting to talk about something with your significant other, they're automatically going to go there, right? And they still might go there if you change your language, but it's less likely. And so again, we want to create as high as a chance of success by what we ask, by how we say things, by the energy we're bringing into this conversation, so that we can explore to see what the problem is, how we can move forward, how we can become stronger, or realize that this relationship might need to end, or this partnership might need to dissolve. We won't know those things unless we enter with the intention to want to listen and really truly understand what's going on. So, we can change. We need to talk to, can I talk to you about something I've been thinking about? Or I want to hear your take on this. You made me feel is another language pattern that we got to be careful of, because that symbolizes blame. And then no one wants to be blamed for 100% of everything, because most times that's not the way that it is. You need to change. You could change this to, this needs to change. Or I'm willing to do X. What are you willing to do? Right? These are other ways of saying, I want your commitment here. You're not the only one that's to blame. I recognize that I play my part in here, this too. And so my language reflects that. Lastly, like, avoid using always or never, because these are like very universal labels. When you say you always do this, or you never do this, you never support me. Never? Not one time. My guess is that there's at least been a few times. But when you say never, it already puts the identity onto someone that change isn't possible. So you're not setting yourself up for success there. You could say there have been several times, but always or never are very cement-like words that I find creates friction and stuck points within conversations that don't need to be there. And so this kind of goes back to sharing your personal examples. If this does happen regularly, saying this happens more than I'd like, and here are the examples of when this happened, you did this, I thought this, like that opens up for more clarity. But always is just, I don't know, it doesn't keep the hope for change alive. Professional triggering language can be the word but. You did great, but no one hears you did great, and they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So, but can be replaced with and. You did a great job, and we still need to work on this. That simple shift, you'd be surprised at what that creates inside the other person. It's quite remarkable. So, being mindful of these little subtle shifts that make all the difference. Obviously, I didn't mean to do that. What's obvious to you is not always what's obvious to other people, clearly, because if it were, they would have changed their behavior and adapted, but they didn't. So, just being aware of that. Shoulds. You should do X, Y, and Z. No one wants to be shoulded to death. Okay. People want to feel empowered. And when you say you should, it's coming from a sense of like authority. I know more than you. You need to listen to me. And that will create a defensive kind of environment for that person to withdraw, avoid, redirect, and not face what's going on and what you're trying to bring to the conversation. All right, so let's work through some examples here. Let's say you witness behavior that is not aligned with the culture or the team, or is not helpful for the environment that you're in at work. You heard from multiple employees that this person did something that needs to be addressed, right? So let's say you schedule that talk, they're sitting across from you. The first thing that I like to do is always express gratitude. And that's just thank you for spending time. Thank you for being here and for taking the time to be with me. Something simple as that. I'd like to focus on X today. I'd like to focus on something that I've been hearing. I'd like to focus on a situation that happened a couple of days ago. I'd like to focus on blank, right? Are you okay with that? Now, sometimes I think people could push back on this. Like, why are you asking if they're okay with it? Anytime people say yes after you've asked them a question, they're more of their engagement is there. If I just assume that they want to talk about it because, hey, they don't have a choice, I'm their leader and they need to listen to me, you may not be getting all of them inside that conversation. So when they say yes, they're giving you permission to go there. They're giving you permission to ask harder questions. They're giving you permission to lay it out on the line, right? There's a extremely low chance that they could say no. And then you combat that by saying, well, we have to talk about this and we'll just go right into it. But by asking, you're really hoping that they say yes and say and grab your hand and start that dance. If this is a time sensitive conversation, meaning that you have a busy schedule, appointments lined up time after time, you want to emphasize how much time you've scheduled for this talk, right? So I have a schedule for 30 minutes. Let's see how far we can get within that time, right? And then you can either set a timer on your phone or you just keep an eye on that depending on your style or your mode. I've done both. I've set a timer and I've just kept it on my desk, and the alarm goes off at 30 minutes, and that just kind of helps have a buffer between you, the time police, and the phone. The phone is the time police, and you are just there to connect with them. Stating your intention. My intention is blank. My intention is to share what I have on my end, to get your feedback, and to find a way to move forward. By you stating that, you're basically telling them how this conversation is going to go, what your hope is, and what type of vibe you're bringing to this interaction. And if this is a type of person that veers off, or you just want to avoid veering off because you know that it could potentially trigger this person and or you, then you might say something like, so if we veer off, I invite each of us to guide us back, so that we, find the next steps in this conversation. Is that okay with you? Yes. Perfect. Hop into that conversation. Right. So that's kind of like how we get into the meat. We want engagement. We want them to know our intention, and we want to kind of combat any potential obstacles by saying it up front. That's why we said, so if we veer off, sometimes I tend to do that. I want to prevent that from happening. So if I veer off or if you veer off, I invite both of us to call that out so that we can make this talk as most effective as possible. If it's in a personal conversation, again, these are tricky because without an actual real life example, we can't get into the nitty gritty. So I'm trying to give as much context as possible without having such a specific example. But let's say you guys have been distant in this personal relationship. There's been some broken expectations, some choice of words that have not been shared, and you're kind of feeling this cold shoulder from the other person. You might say, hey, I want to share with you something that I've been thinking about. All right, can we carve out some time, or can we sit down after dinner, and can I share this with you so I can get your feedback on it? Yes. Saying it that way, can I get your feedback on something that I've been thinking about? It almost creates like you value their opinion and you want them to engage with what you're thinking about, which is true. You really want that. In any relationship, you hope that that's the way that it is. So by framing it that way, you're already bringing them into the conversation. You're sitting down, you say, thank you for listening to me and what I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about my role in this situation. I've been thinking about our relationship. I've been thinking about the love that we have. I've been thinking about how we can become more connected. And I realize that I have not been showing up the way that I want to. I have been avoiding, sharing my feelings. I have been, blank, blank, blank. By you owning your side first, when it comes time for him or her to share their side, they're much more willing to do so. So we always want to bring up our own perspective and the role that we've played, even if that role is we have been avoiding this conversation, or you understand that you could have mentioned something sooner, but you didn't because you just didn't know what to say. Some acknowledgement of what your role is automatically going to increase the odds of them wanting to share more information on their end, which is going to be helpful for you because you'll understand what to do from there. And then invite what they say, right? I'd like to hear your thoughts on, what you're thinking based on what I've said, or what you think the next best steps are. So that would be some examples of, how to incorporate the delivery or the prep and the delivery. So now let's say, what if this conversation veers off? Like it started and now it's like heading to a place that wasn't intended and that it doesn't really need to go to. We want to get back on topic. So I was kind of thinking about what type of personalities would tend to happen here. What type of communication styles tend to get demonstrated. And one common one is that one person will kind of monopolize the conversation. They'll kind of talk ad nauseum, on and on and on. Maybe they're nervous. Maybe they don't know what to say. And by talking, they're filling the space of not hearing what they don't want to hear from you. So by keeping going, they're kind of saving the heartache that they're fearing could be said. That's one possibility. They could just like to hear themselves talk. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons. But let's say you're dealing with someone like that. There's a couple things. One, you can ask something, so you can interject with a question. And the two is posture. And it kind of just depends on the relationship and the history of that relationship. But let's start with the verbal kind of option here. So you notice that they're going on and on and on, and you already have several questions about things they've said minutes ago. Then what I've done in the past is, excuse me, can I say something? Interject. Pattern interrupt. There's a flow going on. You're inserting something. You're asking a question. Asking a question prompts their mind to want to search for a result, causing a break in that flow, right? And if they care anything about you, they're going to say yes. Then that's a time for you to take control back of the pace of that conversation and say something to the likes of, look, things are moving fast right now. And I want to make sure that I'm processing what you're saying. Something that you said a couple minutes ago, I wanted to address. And then you bring that back up. So break the pattern, ask the question, control the pace. So if they're speaking fast, you want to speak a little slower, right? Excuse me. Can I say something real quick? Look, what you're saying is valuable, and I want to make sure I understand it. And things are moving too fast, and I can't process as fast as what you're saying. So can we go back to this? I really thought this when you said that, and I want to unpack that a little bit, or I want to go back to that and really understand what you said there, what you meant, right? That's one example. The other example would be posture, touch. This could be a touch on the hand. This can be a touch on the shoulder. This could be a signal that you send, like you're holding your hand up, not like a child, but like you're almost reaching for them, right? And say, hey, like pause for a second, but with your hands. These all can be effective depending on the context. I've used all of these in one-on-ones, in group trainings. I had a guy one time literally go on he was just going forever. And I sensed that everyone was growing restless because they're like, how much longer is this person going to go? There's no breaks in what this person is saying. He just keeps rambling. And so as he was talking, I kept getting closer and closer and closer to him. And then I got like within, I don't know, let's say a foot, and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, thank you. Here's where we need to go. Here's what I'd really like to understand. Here's the question that I really would like you to answer. And you guide him back to what you want him to say. And you could stay, and then I was able to guide him, and everyone was able to get the answer, and we were able to work through it. But that posture mixed with that look and the vibe of like, I hear you, and here's where I'd like to lead us, right? That can be a way that you break that pattern. Posture also symbolizes intimacy, symbolizes connection. And if it's a loving, like, hey, I hear you kind of touch, that can work very effectively. So that's the first thing. Second thing is when they talk about something that isn't on the topic, affirm and redirect. So let's say, you're talking about a specific behavior and they bring in their cousin or some other employee that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. You could say, look, I sense that this is important to you, and I want to create time to dive into that. But this conversation is centered around blank, and I'd like to stay focused on that. Right? Just a simple affirm. Clearly, this is important to you, or else you wouldn't be saying this. I acknowledge that. There's a time and a place for it. We can schedule time to go there if you'd like. But really, what this time is for is what we agreed upon to talk about, and that is this. That's what I'd like to focus on. And you bring them back. Number 3, if you feel that they aren't saying something that either they need to say or that you want them to say, then reinstate the intention and share your feeling, right? So if they're kind of just rambling but not going to the depths that they're capable of, or you sense that maybe they're hiding something or they're just scared to open up and say something, then this is where the reinstating of the intention and the sharing your feelings have become really important. You might say, look, my intention here is to understand and to support you. I want to hear your side of it. I want to understand what led up to it. And I get the sense that there's something else that you're not saying. And I could be wrong, but I'm listening to you and I can't help but think that there's something deeper. Is there something deeper? And that probe causes them to pause for a second and say, how deep do I want to go? Maybe it is as deep as they can go, and they're saying as much as they can. But without asking that question, we won't know. And our what we see is not always accurate, right? So by asking the question, we can kind of see and play the field on where they're at, what they're doing, and where they can go. So I find that is helpful, and I've done that countless times, and it served me really well. I sense that there's something deeper there. Is there? Is there something that you want to say that you haven't said? And again, my intention here is to listen. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say this or that. I just want to hear from you what's really going on. And that, I can't tell you how many times I've said that and people break down crying. People go, yeah, I mean, there is something else. And that something else is what leads to the breakthrough. That something else is what changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. But you have to be present in that conversation and have the courage to ask that based on what you're sensing. And so the last strategy here is, if the person usually doesn't give information that is helpful for you to change, or they don't offer really any sort of clarity that helps the relationship move in a direction, then you got to address that in the beginning of the conversation. So you might say something like, usually when we have these types of talks, we don't reach the clarity needed to change or needed for me to truly understand. And so I'd like to focus on finding that in this conversation. Will you join me in that? Or you could say something like, what can happen in these types of conversations is that we talk in circles. I know that I have in the past. And so if one of us does and we notice that, let's call it out. Can you agree to that? Cool. This opens up doors for you to be like, That's not aligned here. That doesn't matter. Let's get back to this, right? Again, we want the dance. The dance is important. I'm doing my best to understand, but I'm still unsure or unclear about what happened and what we can do about it. All these are versions of things that you can say to combat someone who doesn't normally like to explore the solution to the problem. They like to stay stuck in the problem. So address it in the beginning. If it happens again throughout the talk, you can reference back to what you said in the beginning and reinstate the intention, and then guide them back to what you need to be talking about. Cool. All right. So you have the conversation, right? It could last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. It just kind of depends, right? But let's say at the end of the conversation, you're going to have a series of outcomes. You may realize that you have found common ground and there is a mutual understanding on the next steps. And so when that happens, you mention that you enjoyed this conversation, you learned so much, and that you want to have these regularly, especially in a professional context. One of the greatest things that you could do is have regular checkups, regular meetings, regularly have touch points with all of those people on your team so that things don't fall beneath the cracks. So common to have 4 conversations with your leader a year for your performance review. That's not enough, right? So making those regularly and commenting on how valuable you thought that conversation was. People don't do that. They always say, thanks for taking the time and see you next time. No, like, why was this valuable and why do you want to do this again? That communicates to the other person like, hey, I was able to learn something new. My leader loved this. My partner, my significant other enjoyed talking about hard things with me. This is different. This is cool. This is new. You may find at the end of this conversation that they're not committed and that the relationship will need to adjust, end, or transition into something new. And that's okay. And you'll need to find out what that looks like. If that's a professional thing and that means letting them go, then that's the hard thing that you're going to have to do. If that means you transfer to a different department, if that means that, you spend less time together, whatever that is, you'll find out as a result of that conversation or a series of conversations, and not being afraid to execute on that. And the other one, let's see. I mean, those are pretty much how they end, right? But I guess to close this out, we need these types of conversations. They make us better. They help us develop different skills. They teach us. They help us grow. And so we need to appreciate them, even if they don't end the way that we want them to. And that doesn't mean that we always need to say thank you, but inside of our own minds, we need to be grateful. Thank you for showing me that this isn't the right relationship. Thank you for being willing to explore this hard thing with me. Thank you for being the type of person that can have hard conversations and grow from them, right? Some form of gratitude, because gratitude allows us to extract the wisdom, to extract the gift from our experience. And, that's how we learn, and that's how we maintain a healthy view on life. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you found this valuable, share this with someone who you think needs to hear it, who is in the thick of a hard conversation or is in need of some strategies to help them navigate it. These have served me well. And I will say one more time that these aren't silver bullets. These are strategies that increase the odds of a favorable conversation, one that both parties understand the next steps and can do so accordingly. So thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for being a part of the Be That 1% family. Sending you all my love. Go out there, be your own 1%, and we'll connect next time.